The text message glowed on Rachel's phone screen like a neon sign advertising my complete humiliation. Don't worry about Matt. He's too busy with his computers to notice what's happening right under his nose. I sat frozen in my own kitchen, holding my wife's forgotten phone, watching 7 years of marriage dissolve into digital betrayal. The sender was Brad Patterson, Rachel's coworker. The same Brad who'd eaten at our dinner table. The same Brad who'd shaken my hand at company parties while apparently planning to screw my wife. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Rachel was upstairs getting ready for work, humming some pop song like she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built together. The morning sun streamed through our kitchen window, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like tiny witnesses to my discovery. Another message popped up. Meet me at the Marriott downtown. Room 412. Same time as always. Same time as always. How long had this been going on? I scrolled through their conversation history, each message a small knife twist, intimate details about their encounters, jokes about my obliviousness. Rachel complaining about my boring personality, while Brad reassured her that I was harmless. Harmless. That word would haunt them both. Matt, have you seen my phone? Rachel called from upstairs. I set the device back on the counter exactly where I'd found it, my hands surprisingly steady. It's down here on the kitchen island. Her heels clicked against our hardwood stairs as she descended. Rachel appeared in the doorway, looking perfect as always. Auburn hair swept into a professional bun, navy blazer pressed, makeup flawless. She could have been modeling for some corporate lifestyle magazine instead of living a double life. Thanks, honey. She grabbed the phone without looking at me, then pecked my cheek with lips that had probably kissed Brad Patterson the night before. I'm running late for that morning meeting. The one with Patterson? I asked, testing her. She paused for just a fraction of a second. Among others. It's a team review. I nodded and took a sip of cold coffee, watching her over the rim of my mug. Rachel had always been good at lying. I'd just never bothered to look for the tells before. The slight hesitation, the way she touched her earring when fabricating details, the forced brightness in her voice. I'll probably be late tonight, she continued, gathering her purse and laptop bag. Budget presentations run long. You know how it is. I know exactly how it is, I said. She kissed me again and headed for the garage. I listened to her BMW start up and pull away, then sat in the silence of our suburban kitchen, planning my next move. The old Matt would have confronted her immediately, would have screamed and thrown things and demanded explanations that would only result in more lies. But the old Matt had died the moment I read that first text message. Something colder had taken his place. I called in sick to my tech consulting job. Let them think I had the flu. I had more important work to do. The Marriott downtown wasn't far from Rachel's office building. I parked across the street at 11:30 and waited. My surveillance equipment consisted of binoculars from our camping gear and an old digital camera with a zoom lens. At 12:15, I watched Rachel walk into the hotel lobby. She'd changed clothes since leaving home that morning. Gone was the conservative navy blazer, replaced by a black dress that hugged every curve. She carried an overnight bag. Brad Patterson arrived 10 minutes later. 6'2", athletic build, expensive suit. The kind of man who probably never struggled with anything in his life. The kind of man who thought taking another man's wife was just another conquest. They embraced in the lobby like lovers reuniting after months apart instead of co-workers who'd probably seen each other at the office that morning. Rachel threw her head back and laughed at something he whispered in her ear. I'd forgotten she could laugh like that. When had she stopped laughing like that with me? I photographed everything. Their arrival, their embrace, the room key card Brad slipped from the front desk, their disappearance into the elevator. Room 412. Just like the text message said. I waited in my car for 2 hours, engine off, windows cracked, watching the hotel entrance like a private investigator in some noir film. Other people went about their normal lives, while mine imploded in slow motion. Rachel emerged first, checking her phone and smoothing her hair. The professional blazer was back on, the black dress presumably stuffed into her overnight bag. She walked to her car with the satisfied stride of someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Brad followed 20 minutes later, loosening his tie and grinning at his phone, probably reading a text from Rachel. Probably planning their next rendezvous. I followed him to his apartment complex in the upscale part of town, 20-story glass tower with a doorman and underground parking, the kind of place that screamed success and attracted women like Rachel. That evening, Rachel came home with Chinese takeout and an elaborate story about her exhausting day of budget meetings. She seemed relaxed, almost glowing. I listened to every fabricated detail while we ate lo mein at our kitchen table. "How was your day?" she asked. "Feeling better?" "Much better," I said. "Actually, I think I'm feeling the best I've felt in years." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad. You've seemed distant lately." Distant. As if I'd been the one pulling away, as if I'd been the one destroying our marriage. After dinner, she went upstairs for a bath while I cleaned up the kitchen. Her phone buzzed against the counter. Another message from Brad. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Same place? Rachel's response came quickly. "Absolutely. Matt will be at work all day." I deleted both messages and put the phone back exactly where she'd left it. That night, lying in bed beside my cheating wife, I started planning my revenge. It would be methodical, it would be thorough, and it would leave them both with nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a student of their affair. I learned their patterns, their meeting places, their schedules. Rachel thought she was being clever, but she'd grown sloppy with confidence. Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Marriott. Wednesday evenings at Brad's apartment when I supposedly had my standing poker game with college buddies. Saturday afternoons at a bed and breakfast outside town while I was allegedly golfing. I documented everything. Photographs, timestamps, locations. I even rented a car to avoid being spotted during my surveillance. The old Matt would have felt guilty about the deception. The new Matt felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My tech background proved useful. I installed monitoring software on our shared laptop that Rachel sometimes used for personal email. Keylogger programs that captured every password, every message, every secret she thought was hidden. Through her email, I discovered the affair had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of lies and deception while I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for our mortgage, her car, her expensive tastes in everything from wine to furniture. I learned that Brad had convinced her I was holding her back. That she deserved someone more ambitious, more exciting, someone who wasn't settling for mediocrity like her husband. I also discovered something else. Rachel had been stealing money from our joint savings account. Small amounts at first, $50 or $100, but recently, larger sums. $2,000 last month, $3,000 the month before, all withdrawn as cash, untraceable. When I confronted our bank records, I realized she'd stolen nearly $15,000 over the past 6 months, money I'd earned while she was playing house with Brad Patterson. The theft changed everything. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about someone who'd decided I was so worthless that she could steal from me while cheating on me, all without consequences. I started making my own preparations. First, I opened a separate bank account and began transferring money from our joint accounts. If Rachel could steal from me, I could protect what remained of my assets. Second, I hired a private investigator to document the affair professionally. Insurance in case I needed legal proof later. Third, I researched Brad Patterson. His background, his job, his weaknesses. Social media made it easy. The man couldn't take a breath without posting about it online. Brad worked in sales for the same financial services company as Rachel. Recently divorced, no kids, lived alone in his expensive apartment. He drove a leased BMW and spent money he probably didn't have on clothes, restaurants, and impressing women like my wife. Most importantly, I discovered Brad's secret. He was embezzling money from his employer. Small amounts, carefully hidden in expense reports and client entertainment costs. Just like Rachel's theft from our savings, Brad thought he was too clever to get caught. I had everything I needed for my revenge. Now, I just needed the right moment to deploy it. The moment came on a Thursday evening in mid-October. Rachel had told me she was working late on a presentation for the regional sales meeting. In reality, she was at the Marriott with Brad, probably planning their next getaway weekend. I drove to Brad's apartment building and parked in the visitor section. The doorman was expecting me. I'd called ahead, claiming to be delivering documents from Brad's office. "Mr. Patterson's not here," the doorman said when I approached the front desk. "I know," I replied, producing a manila envelope with Brad's name written in official-looking font. "His secretary asked me to leave these with you. Urgent contract documents for tomorrow's meeting." The doorman accepted the envelope without question. Inside were photocopies of Brad's expense reports with the embezzlement highlighted in yellow, along with a note. "Someone's been watching you. Be more careful. Phase 1 complete." The next morning, I called Rachel's office pretending to be a florist, confirming delivery details for her birthday next week. Her assistant cheerfully provided her schedule, including a lunch meeting with Brad at 12:30. I arrived at the restaurant first and requested a table with clear sight lines to the entrance. When Rachel and Brad walked in together, I was already seated and waiting. They looked nervous, which told me Brad had shared my little gift with Rachel. Good. I wanted them paranoid. I watched them huddle together over their menus, whispering urgently. Rachel kept glancing around the restaurant as if she expected me to materialize from behind a potted plant. Brad's usual confidence had evaporated. He looked like a man who'd finally realized he was playing a dangerous game. Their conversation was animated but hushed. I couldn't hear the words, but their body language screamed panic. Rachel touched her earring repeatedly. Brad ran his hands through his hair and checked his phone every few minutes. When the waiter approached their table, I stood up and walked over. "Rachel," I said calmly. "Brad." My wife's face went white. Brad actually flinched. The waiter sensed the tension and quickly retreated. "Matt," Rachel stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Having lunch," I replied, pulling out the empty chair at their table and sitting down uninvited. "Mind if I join you?" The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Other diners were starting to notice our little tableau. "How's the presentation going?" I asked Rachel. "The one you were working on so late last night?" Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Brad found his voice first. "Look, Matt, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I interrupted. "I understand perfectly. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope identical to the one I'd left at Brad's building. I placed it on the table between them. "What's that?" Rachel whispered. "Insurance," I said. "Open it." Brad's hands shook as he lifted the envelope's flap. Inside were photographs of them entering and leaving the Marriott, bank records showing Rachel's thefts from our joint account, copies of their text messages expressing contempt for me. "You've been busy," Brad said, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "You have no idea," I replied. Rachel was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The professional facade had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "Matt, please," she said. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I made a mistake, but—" "Mistakes," I corrected. "Plural. For 8 months. While stealing my money to fund your little romance." I stood up and straightened my jacket. The entire restaurant was watching now. But I didn't care. Let them see. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Rachel, you're going to move out of our house by this weekend. Brad, you're going to find a new job. And both of you are going to pray I don't decide to share these photos with everyone you know. I walked out of the restaurant while they sat frozen at their table, the envelope of evidence lying open between them like a detonated bomb. By Friday morning, Rachel had moved into her sister Jenny's apartment across town. She'd taken only clothes and personal items, leaving everything else behind. Her lawyer had already called mine, though what she expected to gain from that conversation was unclear. I'd changed all the locks and passwords, canceled her credit cards, transferred the remaining joint savings into my personal account. She could fight me for half of it later, but she'd have to hire lawyers with money she no longer had access to. The house felt different without her, cleaner somehow, like removing a source of infection. My phone rang constantly. Rachel, her sister, her mother, a few mutual friends who'd heard different versions of the story. I let them all go to voicemail. I had more important work to finish. Brad Patterson was proving harder to crack. He'd called me twice, wanting to talk man to man about the situation. I ignored those calls too. Let him sweat. On Friday evening, I drove to his apartment building and waited. He emerged at 7:30, dressed for a night out, probably meeting Rachel somewhere to plan their next move. I followed him to a trendy bar downtown where he met Rachel at a corner booth. They looked like shell-shocked refugees from some natural disaster. Rachel wore sunglasses despite the dim lighting, probably hiding the evidence of days spent crying. Brad kept checking the entrance like he expected armed men to burst through at any moment. I took a table across the room and ordered a beer, close enough to observe, far enough away to avoid detection. Their conversation was heated. Rachel gestured frantically while Brad shook his head repeatedly. At one point, she grabbed his arm and he pulled away, glancing around the bar nervously. Then something interesting happened. A woman approached their table, mid-40s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase. She slid into the booth beside Brad, trapping him against the wall. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read the body language. The woman was asking questions. Brad was providing increasingly desperate answers. Rachel looked confused and frightened. The woman produced documents from her briefcase and spread them on the table. Even from across the room, I could see numbers and charts, financial records. Brad's face turned gray. He tried to stand, but the woman put a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. She said something that made him slump back against the booth cushions like a deflated balloon. Rachel was asking questions now, but the woman ignored her completely. Her attention was focused entirely on Brad, who looked like he might vomit into his untouched drink. After 20 minutes, the woman collected her documents and left. Brad and Rachel sat in stunned silence for several minutes before Rachel stormed out of the bar. Brad remained at the table, staring into his glass like it contained the answers to his problems. I finished my beer and left. I didn't need to know what the woman had said to Brad. I could guess. The private investigator I'd hired called Saturday morning with an update. "Your wife and her boyfriend are having problems," she said. Big problems. Such as? Patterson's been called in for a financial audit at his company. Someone tipped them off about irregularities in his expense reports. I smiled into the phone. Someone? Anonymous tip came in Thursday morning. Very detailed, very specific. Companies bringing in external auditors Monday morning. And Rachel? She's staying with her sister, but that might not last long. Word is, Jenny's getting tired of the drama. Your wife keeps calling Patterson, but he's not taking her calls. Anything else? Patterson's been asking around about lawyers. Expensive ones who specialize in white-collar crime. Sounds like he knows what's coming. After I hung up, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on my back deck, enjoying the autumn morning. The trees in our yard were changing colors, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson. It was going to be a beautiful day. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "We need to talk, please." I deleted the message without responding. Another text. "I know you're angry, but we can fix this. I love you." Delete. A third. "I'm sorry about the money. I'll pay it back, I promise. Delete. She called twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. In the first message, she was crying and apologetic. In the second, she was angry and demanding. The real Rachel was starting to show through the cracks. Sunday morning brought news that made my coffee taste even better. Jenny called, sounding exhausted. Matt, I'm sorry to bother you, but Rachel can't stay here anymore. What happened? She's been calling Brad nonstop, showing up at his apartment, making scenes in the lobby. Last night, she tried to get me to lie to his building security, claim she was authorized to go up to his floor. And you told her no. Of course I told her no. I'm not getting involved in this mess. She needs to find somewhere else to stay. Where will she go? I don't know, and honestly, I don't care anymore. She made her choices. She can live with the consequences. After Jenny hung up, I realized Rachel was completely isolated. Her sister had kicked her out. Her lover was avoiding her calls. Her husband had locked her out of their house and their finances. She was finally experiencing consequences for her actions. Monday evening, Rachel showed up at our front door. I watched her through the security camera system I'd installed over the weekend, another benefit of my tech background. She looked terrible. Unwashed hair, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under her eyes. She rang the doorbell repeatedly, then pounded on the door when I didn't answer. Matt, I know you're in there. Your car's in the garage. I stayed in the kitchen, drinking wine and reviewing financial documents my lawyer had prepared. Divorce papers, asset division worksheets, evidence folders containing everything from hotel receipts to bank records. Please, Matt. I have nowhere else to go. The pounding continued for 20 minutes before she finally gave up and left. I watched her drive away in her BMW, probably the only thing of value she had left. Tuesday morning brought better news. The private investigator called with an update. Patterson's been suspended pending investigation. They found evidence of embezzlement going back 18 months. We're talking about serious money, maybe $50,000 or more. Will he be arrested? Probably. The company's deciding whether to prosecute or just fire him and demand restitution. Either way, his career in financial services is over. What about Rachel? She's been staying in a motel out by the interstate. Cheap place. She tried to get a room at the Marriott where she used to meet Patterson, but her credit cards were declined. After the call, I felt something resembling satisfaction. Not happiness. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel genuinely happy again, but a cold sense that justice was being served. Rachel called that afternoon from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Matt, please don't hang up. What do you want, Rachel? I want to come home. I want to fix this. There's nothing to fix. It's broken beyond repair. That's not true. People work through these things all the time. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. You mean like the 8 months when you were screwing Brad Patterson while stealing my money? That kind of whatever it takes? She was crying now. I know I made mistakes. Stop calling them mistakes. You made choices. Deliberate, calculated choices. For 8 months. I love you, Matt. I never stopped loving you. You have an interesting way of showing love. Brad meant nothing to me. He was just... I was lonely. You were working so much, and he paid attention to me. Made me feel special. Special enough to steal $15,000 to fund your affair. The silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. How did you find out about the money? I found out about everything, Rachel. Every hotel room, every lie, every dollar you stole while I was working to support us. I'll pay it back. With what? You don't have a job anymore. Another silence. Then, what do you mean? You haven't checked your work email recently, have you? I could hear her fumbling with her phone. A few seconds later, she gasped. They fired me? Effective immediately. Something about being involved with a colleague under investigation for financial crimes. Bad for the company's reputation. You did this. You told them about Brad and me. I didn't have to. Companies don't like being associated with scandals, especially when those scandals involve employee theft. She was crying harder now. Matt, please, I have nothing left. Nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you decided I was too boring for you. I hung up and blocked her number. 3 weeks later, I was working late in my home office when the doorbell rang. The security camera showed Rachel standing on the front porch, but she looked different, thinner, desperate. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by jeans and a faded sweater that hung loose on her diminished frame. I considered ignoring her, but something in her posture suggested this would be our final conversation. She stood with her shoulders hunched, shifting weight from foot to foot, like a child waiting to be scolded. This wasn't the confident woman who'd walked into that hotel lobby 3 months ago. I opened the door, but left the chain lock engaged, creating just enough space to see her clearly, while maintaining distance. What do you want, Rachel? I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say words to make you feel better. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying or screaming or both. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes suggested weeks of poor sleep. Hollow cheeks spoke of missed meals or lost appetite. Her hands shook when she gestured, whether from cold or nerves or something else entirely. I know what I did was unforgivable, she continued. I know I destroyed everything good between us. Everything we built together. So why are you here? I asked, my voice flat and emotionless. Because I need you to know that I understand now. What I threw away. What I lost. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture that would have horrified the old Rachel. I understand that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away for nothing. I waited, saying nothing. Let her talk. Let her confess. Let her finally tell the truth about something. Brad was never going to leave his life for me, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. He was using me the same way I was using him. When his world started falling apart, when the company started investigating him, he cut off all contact, blocked my number, changed his locks. Like I was some kind of stalker instead of someone who'd risked everything for him. She laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of humor. He told me I was special, that we had something real. But the moment his career was threatened, the moment things got complicated, I became a liability. He actually told his lawyer that I was stalking him. Can you believe that? After 8 months of sneaking around, after all those times I lied to you to be with him, he painted me as some desperate woman who wouldn't leave him alone. Her voice rose with indignation, then cracked with despair. And maybe I was desperate. Maybe I did call too many times when everything started falling apart. But I thought what we had meant something. I thought he cared about me. And I realized that you were the only person who ever really loved me. The only person who ever put me first. She looked directly at me through the gap in the door, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. You worked those long hours, not because you were avoiding me, but because you were building a future for us. You never made me feel like I had to earn your love or compete for your attention. You just loved me, consistently for 7 years. Her voice cracked completely now. I threw away 7 years of marriage, 7 years of genuine love and partnership, for someone who didn't even care enough to answer his phone when I needed help. I studied her face through the gap in the door. The tears were real. The regret was genuine. But it was too late for tears and regret. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? I asked. No, I don't deserve your sympathy. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. And I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Not because I'm facing consequences. But because I hurt the only person who ever really loved me. The old Matt might have felt something stir at her words, might have considered the possibility of reconciliation, of therapy, of slowly rebuilding what had been destroyed. But the old Matt was gone, burned away by months of lies and betrayal. "Where are you staying?" I asked, more from curiosity than concern. "A shelter downtown. I lost the motel room last week when my unemployment ran out." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather rather than her complete fall from grace. "What about your parents?" "They won't speak to me." Jenny told them everything, about the affair, about the money I stole, about how I've been living. My mother called me a disgrace to the family. My father hung up on me. She laughed that bitter laugh again. Turns out even unconditional parental love has its limits. "What about your friends?" "What friends?" "The ones from work who got fired along with me when the scandal broke? The ones from our social circle who all knew you first?" Turns out adultery is still social suicide in suburban circles. Nobody wants to be associated with the woman who cheated on her devoted husband and stole from him. For a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Rachel had always been social, always needed approval and validation from others. To be completely cut off from her support network must have been devastating. Then I remembered $15,000 in stolen cash, 8 months of elaborate lies, text messages calling me boring and naive while she plotted her deception. "I'm sorry you're having a hard time," I said. "But that's not my problem anymore." I know. I know it's not your problem, and I know you don't owe me anything. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught, but sorry I did it in the first place." She took a shaky breath. "I need you to know that every single day I wake up and remember what I had with you. How safe I felt. How loved I felt. How you would bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. How you would listen to me complain about work even when you'd had your own terrible day. How you never once made me feel like I wasn't enough." Tears were streaming down her face now. And I threw it all away because some smooth-talking salesman made me feel exciting for a few hours a week. I traded a lifetime of genuine love for temporary thrills, and now I have nothing. No husband, no home, no job, no family, no friends. Nothing. She was sobbing now, the kind of ugly crying that made her whole body shake. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too stupid and selfish to appreciate what I had. I watched her fall apart on my doorstep and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just a cold emptiness where my feelings for her used to be. "You're right," I said simply. "You did throw it all away." She nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve again. I know I did." She looked up at me one last time. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost." She turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back. "Matt? What? What happened to Brad?" "I haven't heard from him since the investigation started. His phone number's been disconnected, and his apartment building won't tell me anything." I could have told her that Brad Patterson had been arrested the previous week on embezzlement charges, that he was looking at 3 to 5 years in federal prison, that his expensive apartment had been repossessed, his BMW returned to the dealer, his entire life dismantled piece by piece just like hers. I could have told her that he'd tried to pin some of the blame on her, claiming she'd pressured him to steal money to fund their affair, that he'd told investigators she was an unstable woman who'd threatened to expose their relationship if he didn't give her money. I could have told her that karma had been just as thorough with him as it had been with her. Instead, I said, "I wouldn't know. I don't keep track of other people's problems." She nodded sadly and walked back to her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with rust spots and a cracked windshield. It was a far cry from the BMW she'd driven when she was stealing my money to impress her lover. I watched her struggle with the key for a moment, before the engine finally turned over with a coughing sound that suggested it might not survive many more starts. She didn't look back as she drove away, her taillights disappearing around the corner. I closed the door and engaged all the locks, Deadbolt, chain, security bar. The house was mine now, completely mine, and I intended to keep it that way. Back in my office, I returned to the financial planning documents spread across my desk. Retirement accounts showing steady growth. Investment portfolios diversified and performing well. The insurance settlement from selling Rachel's BMW to pay for her legal fees, money that had come back to me when she couldn't afford to fight the divorce. My phone buzzed with an email from my lawyer. The divorce had been finalized that afternoon. The house was officially mine. The remaining assets were officially mine. Rachel had signed everything without contest, probably because she couldn't afford to hire a lawyer to fight me in court. The email included a copy of the final decree. Reading through it felt like closing the last chapter of a book I'd never wanted to finish. 7 years of marriage reduced to legal language about asset division and spousal support, or in this case, the complete lack thereof. I was officially a free man. I poured myself a glass of wine, a nice Cabernet that Rachel had always said was too expensive for everyday drinking, and walked out to the back deck. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of burning leaves from somewhere in the neighborhood. Halloween decorations adorned nearby houses, fake skeletons and ghosts marking the approach of my favorite holiday. Looking out at the yard Rachel and I had planted together 3 years ago, I could see how much work it needed. Weeds had taken over the flower beds where she'd once spent hours arranging perennials. The small vegetable garden was overgrown with vines. Several bushes needed trimming, and the lawn required reseeding in spots. Tomorrow I'd start making changes, not just maintaining what we'd built together, but creating something entirely new. I'd always wanted to expand the deck, maybe add a hot tub. Rachel had vetoed the idea, claiming it was too expensive and would ruin the aesthetic of the yard. I'd also convert the basement into a workshop. I'd always loved woodworking, but had given it up when we moved in together, because Rachel needed the space for storage that had mostly consisted of expensive clothes she rarely wore and kitchen gadgets she never used. The workshop could have everything I'd always wanted: a proper table saw, a router table, space for hand tools and wood storage. I could build furniture, maybe even start selling pieces online. It would be a creative outlet that was entirely mine, untainted by memories of compromise and accommodation. Rachel. I wondered briefly how long she'd stay at the shelter, whether she'd find a job, rebuild her life, learn from her mistakes. Part of me, a very small part, hoped she would. Despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal and theft, I didn't want her to suffer forever. But that part was easily overwhelmed by the memory of her laughter in the hotel lobby, the sound of genuine joy she'd shared with another man while lying to my face. The memory of discovering those text messages, reading her complaints about my boring personality while she planned her next deception. The memory of finding out she'd been stealing money I'd earned working overtime, money I'd saved for our future while she was using it to fund her affair. She'd made her choices, one after another, for 8 months. Now she could live with the consequences. I finished my wine and went inside to start planning my new life. A life without betrayal, without lies, without someone who thought I was too boring to deserve honesty and respect. For the first time in months, I felt something resembling peace. Not happiness. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel genuinely happy again, but a calm satisfaction that justice had been served. Rachel and Brad had both gotten exactly what they deserved, and I was free to build something better from the ashes of what they'd destroyed. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. My house now, my sanctuary, my new beginning. I turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed, leaving the past behind me where it belonged. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of my life, and for the first time in years, that thought didn't fill me with dread.